Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto 2 Blue Vortex discussion video. This is going to be my speculation ahead of chapter 14, which is coming out in about 5 days. So the big thing here, why I'm doing this now, is that we have just yesterday we got the official preview page for chapter 14. So this is a page we will see in a couple of days. It's not translated here. People have translated it. Basically what's happening on this page is that we see Sakura is finally going to be in the story once again. She's checking up on Inojin here, who of course was healed by Himawari in the kind of previous chapter. So I think the idea of what she's saying here is that she's very impressed by kind of how thoroughly Inojin has been healed overall, given what his injury was of course said to be. Then we see that Ino is also in the scene here, just kind of off screen, and we just address that, like, oh, so is he done basically? And I think what Sakura kind of gets to here is the idea of, well, he's like overall healed, but his chakra is blocked, so I need to kind of help get that kind of flowing again. But overall it's good, and of course Himawari is happy about this. So obviously it speaks to how incredible Himawari's healing abilities are, but that you still need a skilled medical ninja to do some of the very delicate work, like, you know, getting the energy flow kind of going again, given how big the injury was, and that, yeah, Inojin was going to die basically. But the big thing here is just that, okay, we're going into a little bit of a calm before we build up to bigger stuff happening again. We did have the retreat of the villains. Boruto is captured. So there's going to be more character interaction scenes going up to allow for stuff like that scene at the hospital to take place. So that's all super interesting. But let's quickly recap chapter 13, the last chapter. So of course the big thing that everyone was talking about, Kashin was revealed to have this new divine jutsu, shinjutsu, called prescience, where he can see possible futures effectively. So he has some sense of future sight, where he can see that in some sort of versions of the timeline this happens, in some versions this happens, and so he's highlighting that you know, this is where he has so much information, how he seems to know more than the story is presenting. So there's a lot of information that probably Boruto has to reveal that even we don't know just yet. One of the other things we get is that a 5th Divine Tree character is about to make their debut. By the visuals, it is likely based on Shinki, Gaara's, you know, quote-unquote son. So that suggests that maybe we're going to expand the story to include more of the villages, which, if we are building up to one of the bigger fights, that makes sense to bring the other Kage, especially, into play. So that's just an interesting detail there. And then, yeah, the big thing we're trying to avoid here is a lot of the timelines end with Boruto being killed by Jura, the sort of like leader of the you know, enemy force effectively. And this needs to be avoided because the overall threat still remains. If the divine tree grows, the planet is destroyed effectively, and that's the overall threat that we have to stop from happening. And the other thing we then get is that, of course, like I mentioned, Boruto is captured by the Leaf Village, and Kashin notes that this is quite bothersome. So I guess he has seen future versions of the future where this happens, and I guess it gets more complicated, because he is noting that, like, as you know, the present actually moves through different kind of iterations of stuff actually happening, the future gets more and more sort of, in a way, challenging. There's more and more ways for this to go wrong, and there's fewer and fewer kind of pathways to a good outcome. And I guess Boruto being captured here is maybe not ideal overall, but there's still some ways to make some stuff happen, is sort of the idea. It is an interesting thing to introduce this sort of ability because, you know, Kashin in a way should never be overly concerned about any situation, because theoretically there is always a positive outcome of any scenario, and he can maybe help to make that happen, but there's a lot of work to force those kind of situations, is I guess the basic idea. And then also Hidari, despite being destroyed, has now been revived from his thorn soul bulb situation. So, getting into more of the speculation here, of course the preview page, like I showed you here, includes Sakura in the chapter. So we get to meet her for the first time in a long time, especially since Two Blue Vortex has started. And we definitely would like to just get up to speed on what her thoughts on everything kind of are, especially because, you know, these are some of our main characters from Naruto, and with the current status of, you know, one of the big missions is to sort of save Sasuke from being trapped inside one of the trees. Naruto, of course, is trapped in a different dimension. She is the last remaining character kind of active in the story from, you know, our core Naruto team, effectively. So it is, you know, nice to kind of see her kind of utilized again. And I hope it's more than just we're doing some medical stuff with Sakura and moving on from that, because she knows a lot of what's going on. She is a leader to a certain degree within the village. This should be viewed as an important kind of character return. Like, we want to know stuff like, what is Sakura and Sarada's relationship like? Given that Sarada is viewed as a bit of a rebel within the village because she can see through the omnipotence. It hasn't affected her, whereas everyone else is affected, and that creates a bit of tension between a lot of the characters. Has Sakura begun to see maybe some of these issues within her, kind of her own memories, and might we be able to find a way to kind of help her break through omnipotence and properly, truly doubt things overall? And that would be an interesting kind of plot point. But then we also have the more emotional side of things, of like, how is she doing, given that, you know, Sasuke is, you know, quote unquote lost in the situation that he's in. What does she know of that necessarily? And then also the fact that, as far as she's aware, I guess she thinks Naruto and Hinata are dead. A lot of key people around her kind of gone. That's you know, quite you know, terrible situation for her. So I'd like for that stuff to be addressed. The problem is, I think it's difficult to be super confident in Boruto in terms of like the writing, that they will do this, because they do struggle when a few too many characters get involved in the story. Like, already at times the story can be quite heavily focused on it's Boruto, it's Kawaki, and we are lucky if any of the other characters really get a ton of attention. Like, we are desperate for Sarada to be kept in the spotlight, so the fact that we're hoping Sakura gets a bit of spotlight here, it's like, I hope they can manage this kind of well enough, because there's still a lot of stuff with Sarada we need to know about in terms of like where her skill level is at these days, who trained her during the time skip. You know, does she know some of the stuff that Sakura knows? You know, those type of questions. So yeah, I hope the scene is more than effectively just, hey, here's a quick cameo here, and that we actually get other scenes that either, I'm guessing probably this is an emergency situation, but that after this, Sakura, once Inojin is okay, can come out and talk to a lot of the other characters about kind of what's going on. Now, the tricky kind of point there is that, you know, we need, basically, I would say, Sarada scenes with Sakura is probably what we're looking for, but then we also are maybe looking for scenes with like Sakura in the same room as probably Boruto and Kawaki, as well as her daughter. But, you know, we have to wait and see what happens there. Otherwise, like, I'm guessing what's going to happen in the village, given that, okay, the villains have retreated, we'll get to them in a second. They're going to want to interrogate Boruto about what's happened, because everyone mostly is still under the effects of omnipotence, so they view him as being Kawaki, so most people are going to consider him an enemy of the village. But they can't ignore the fact that a lot of his actions recently have been helpful to the village's cause. He's defending the village ultimately, and it's mostly past actions from basically like pre-swap that are like the real issue that they have here. So this is where I would say the Kaaki situation is quite interesting to see how he handles this in terms of how much is he going to let people talk to Boruto without him being there to kind of lean into the kind of false narratives about what's going on here, because I think we've already seen that a lot of it is beginning to fall apart. He's maybe not doing the best job at performing his part of the act, and it's beginning to fall apart in certain situations, such as, Mitsuki. He has not kept up that friendship with Mitsuki, and Mitsuki at this point fully believes Boruto is actually his, son, basically, rather than Kaaki. And other stuff like that. Other characters can see that this should, like, Kaaki is Boruto in their mind, and he's not acting like himself anymore. So they're going to see something in Boruto, which I think is quite interesting. But then we have other situations where, like, from a bunch of chapters ago, I think we know Ada wants to talk to Boruto, so that might be something that we get, and that could be quite interesting to see what's happening there. But we'd probably be hoping that, Boruto kind of gets people up to speed on what he knows. That, in a way, one of the only ways to get out of this situation, unless Boruto is maybe going to take advantage of an opportunity to just somehow escape, but he seems to be quite heavily trapped. They put the special handcuffs on him that prevent him from doing hand signs, so he's not even going to be able to, like, flying Raijin Jutsu out of the place. So he might have to convince people to be like, hey, I have all this information. Here's what's actually going on. Here's what those things are. Here's why one of them looks like Sasuke and what the situation is with the other ones. This is how you save people from that. Like, for instance, Konohamaru is right there. He's the one who handcuffs him. If Boruto could reveal basically how to free Moegi, that could be something that, changes the kind of hearts and minds of a lot of the people there on the scene. So Boruto might need to be quite free with the information here, but the question is, what's Kaaki going to do while all of this is actually happening? And it feels like we need everyone to work together, potentially even if the reveal about the fifth divine trait character happens, bringing the other kind of villages in on things as well. The other thing that maybe we have the option to do now is that Amado probably has to come back into play a little bit more now as well. Because just he knows stuff about related topics, Otsutsuki, especially after in chapter 13, they once again brought up the idea of he implanted Shibai Otsutsuki DNA into, like, all the Kara members, and that's why they have, like, Shinjutsus. That still remains a huge thing, so he theoretically should know some sense, maybe combined with information Boruto has, about what to do in this situation. The other thing more personally for him is that for the first time in a while, we have sort of Boruto and Kaaki in an okay situation in the same location. So he's beginning to already see through omnipotence and what the situation is with the switch. He seems to know that it is actually Kaaki that he needs to revive Akebi and not Boruto. But he's maybe still having some doubts. Now that they're both here, just to make sure, is now the time to do that. And maybe Akebi is important for more than just the purpose of, he wants his daughter back. That she might be actually quite useful to have, depending on, like, what powers maybe she has when she kind of, in a way, comes into existence. Like, is there maybe an opportunity to have her awaken with a different Shinjutsu in some sort of a unique way? Is there some clever idea like that Amado could have? Because, again, there is another divine trait character. There's another big enemy joining the fight here, so we need more characters, potentially. I just feel that, like, this needs to be remembered, that the whole thing with his daughter has been set up for a while now, and I don't know when we're coming back to it. But then, yes, the final point is that the cliffhanger, like the very end of chapter 13, is the kind of reveal that this is about to happen. Matsui, I think, is the one who's going to seemingly activate her powers to form this new divine tree character, apparently based on Shinki. So it'll be interesting to see how this specifically works, and like, is this going to be the last of these characters, or are more expected? Certainly, like I said, this is the way to bring like the Sand Village into play. So will this also bring Gaara and a lot of the other characters into play? That could be interesting if we are maybe in the process at this point of maybe building into some sort of a bigger final fight. Now, where exactly the whole Boruto and Kawaki confront each other happens in all of this is quite kind of confusing, in that, do we deal with the whole Divine Tree threat and then finally address the personal threat? So we kind of do what they did in original Naruto, of have like the war, and then the Kaguya stuff happens, and then Naruto versus Sasuke? Is that what we're doing again? Or is there room to do Kawaki and Boruto before we jump into a bigger final battle? But again, because that's the point here, is omnipotence. When is omnipotence going to be reversed? To best face off against the Divine Tree characters, we probably should have that reversed, so everyone's in the right situation, working together, and then you can have Boruto Kawaki fight it out, and hopefully, you know, Kawaki maybe is finally back to his senses again, and they can fight on the same team once more, and that's maybe the best situation to go into some sort of a final fight. But we also don't know the scope of Boruto as a series, in terms of, are these Divine Tree characters and what's happening right now the finale, or is there going to be a section of the story after all of this where we do address more of the overall Otsutsuki threat? Because, again, it is very noticeable that they have still not come back to Momoshiki, and what the situation is with Boruto and Momoshiki, and why his karma powers are so dangerous for Boruto. So there's a lot that it feels like has to happen on that side of things, and I don't think they're going to wrap up this series without addressing sort of, okay, we have once again saved the planet from a Ten Tails thing, but are we ever going to actually properly save the world unless we deal with why the Ototsukis are targeting the planet in the first place? And that realistically needs to involve, you know, the high-ups of the Ototsukis coming into play, and not just like scattered Ototsuki, like adjacent kind of characters that are happening right now. Because again, they introduced the God Otsutsuki stuff, I think, for a reason, and we're interested to see kind of when that stuff comes into play. But that's more long-term stuff. I don't see that stuff really coming into play for quite a while now. I think we are going to deal with the Divine Tree characters and likely Boruto versus Kawaki before that stuff happens, but who knows? So yeah, I'm pretty excited going into this, because I'm glad that the sort of standoff in the village that we sort of knew was not going to be the final standoff is over, and that we can have a little bit of a calm down to maybe more build up to directly to the proper fights. Because again, we are expecting eventually the key characters to be paired off with their relevant, you know, Divine Tree enemies. So, you know, Konohamaru leading Moegi's team against Matsui makes a ton of sense. You know, probably Ada and Demon facing off against the Bug Divine Tree character, whose name was revealed in the last chapter. I just completely forgot it. So yeah, I think that's revealed right at the start, isn't it? So his name is Mamushi. So Mamushi. So he I'm guessing involves Ada and Demon and maybe some other characters, because of course his target is Ada, and we also have to remember that the characters do have their targets as well. There's still questions about Jura when it comes to like the situation that we've just went through, of what was Jura just like wrong about his target? Like, was his target actually like Himawari? He just maybe got the details of who it was. Like, he expected it to be Naruto, but it actually was Himawari. Or is his target still actually Naruto, and you know, Himawari popping up was just like a an accident kind of mistake, because it's not necessarily the case that it's just specifically that they're only after the characters who have like tail beasts in them or anything like that, because a lot of the other targets don't have that. He specifically was hunting Naruto using tail beast stuff because that's what he knows of him. But then it gets into like what information each of the characters have about certain stuff, and there's a lot of kind of up in the air information here that's interesting. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are heading into Two Blue Vortex chapter 14. What are your expectations for like where the trajectory of the series is going now that we're entering a little bit of a kind of cool down period, but we're going to build up, of course, to fights, to free these characters, to deal with these villains. What is the idea for the series going forward? But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.